Check one, two, check one, two. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for mock draft version 3.0 post lottery. Really excited to jump into this one. There's some moving pieces, some moving parts, getting some more information about who's working out for which teams, and it gives me better insight onto potentially what could happen in the actual 2023 NBA draft. If you are new to the channel, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel for more content like what you see in this video, and then hit that notification bell as well. We're chasing 3,000 subs with that notification bell turned on, so it'd be awesome if you guys could help us get there, as well as on that chase to actually 20,000 subscribers. Is crazy. When I started this channel, never thought we'd get to this point, and I feel like we're just getting started. I actually just dropped over $3,000 on a brand new setup and computer, so I'm really excited for the future of Utility Sports. A lot of changes coming, good ones that are going to positively impact the quality and also the quantity of videos in a positive way. So I'm really excited for it. So let's jump forward into the first overall pick. And of course, this is the San Antonio Spurs here, and there's really no surprise. Victor Wembanyama will be the first overall selection in San Antonio, and it's a perfect pairing. I actually have a video up on the channel that is a pretty good deep dive into what Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio will look like next to Trey Jones and next to Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan. It's about a 15-minute video, and it really breaks down a lot of what San Antonio could look to do with him and how he's going to complement those players, some of the areas that Victor Wembanyama himself has to improve yet. So I really recommend checking that video out, especially if you're a Spurs fan. I spent a lot of time on that video. It was probably a 15 to 20 hour edit process to get that video where I wanted, and that doesn't even count writing the script and everything that went into that one. So definitely check that out. But as for this pick, it's the no-brainer. Victor Wembanyama is a generational prospect. I see people constantly saying that, oh, he might be a bust, or, you know, what if his body doesn't hold up? I really don't care about any of those concerns, because first of all, he won't be a bust. He's way too talented. And secondly, if his body falls apart, then, well, at least you were the GM smart enough to take him, and luck just wasn't on your side, okay? You don't have to overthink this, okay? Victor Wembanyama at 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan. He's a massive human being who, there's going to be times where he's defending out on the perimeter and a guy's going to make a perfect pass and it's still going to be stolen. That's how generational Victor Wembanyama is. He steals wraparound passes. He steals normal back cut passes that you think should be wide open layups. They end up being stolen by him because his fingertip happens to touch the basketball, whereas no other player in the entire planet would have been able to reach that ball. Plus, he's got the lateral fluidity, not to mention the offensive skill set to go along with it. So San Antonio is getting a transformational player here, a transcendent player, and he will be the #1 scoring option for this team on night one. They're going to cater to him. They're going to build the offense around him, and San Antonio is adding a guy capable of averaging 22, 23, maybe even higher, probably higher in terms of points per game as a rookie. He's also going to throw in 8 to 9 rebounds a night, probably 3 to 3.5 blocks a game. Yes, you heard me right. He's one of the best deterrents I've ever seen at the rim. So he's going to be unbelievable in the NBA. And I think the San Antonio Spurs are getting a player who wants to win, and he's going to be able to pretty quickly into his career, because San Antonio has the pieces around him to at least begin that process. And in a couple of years, we're going to be talking about the Spurs as a dangerous playoff team for sure. Going into pick 2, the Charlotte Hornets at this spot, and there's a lot of divide. You hear talking heads like Jonathan Givony saying, well, Brandon Miller should be the 2nd overall pick, this, that, and the other thing. And then you have actual people who know what they're talking about saying that Scoot Henderson should and probably will be the 2nd overall pick, and that is still the way I feel about it. It's the way I felt about it for a very long time. Remember, back in November in Las Vegas, Victor Wembanyama faced off against Scoot Henderson, and there were scouts, lead executives from all 30 NBA teams in attendance. Last time there was a lot of scouts and executives in attendance for Brandon Miller playing was when he was playing in the college basketball tournament, and he was playing through a groin injury, and because of that, he didn't play very well all tournament long. Scoot Henderson, he is a fantastic player. 6'2", he has really good playmaking feel. He is a true point guard. I know there's some questions about, is he a combo guard? No, he's not. He's a point guard, okay? He can handle the rock. He can get downhill. He's one of the most athletic players I've really evaluated, honestly. You look at his vertical explosion, it's off the charts, okay? Now, there are some downsides. He's very right-handed when it comes to finishing. I think his first year in the league, even though finishing is going to be one of his long-term skill sets that work really well in the NBA, the first year is going to be a little rough. Now, if you tell me right now that Brandon Miller has a better rookie season than Scoot Henderson. I wouldn't be completely surprised by that because he's bigger. He's going to adjust a little bit easier to the NBA. But Brandon Miller, long term, I think has a significantly lower ceiling because he's not as quick, not as explosive, struggles to finish around the rim through contact. And in those moments when Brandon Miller gets chest to chest with somebody and ends up missing a little 8-footer, Scoot Henderson ends up putting a guy on a poster. And I think that's a big difference. Also, I think that there's some discussion about whether or not Scoot Henderson would fit around LaMelo Ball. First of all, the Hornets, they had the 4th worst record in the league this year. LaMelo Ball has yet to play in a playoff game. I mean, yes, LaMelo Ball is quote-unquote the face of the franchise right now in Charlotte, and you can 100% feel confident in that, I think. But we can't act like Charlotte's this like loaded team. This isn't the Golden State Warriors from a few years ago where, oh, well, Steph Curry missed the entire season and Klay Thompson was out. And by the way, they are 3-time champions at that point. This is not that team, okay? Again, LaMelo Ball's never played in a playoff game. Yes, LaMelo missed a significant amount of time. That did change Charlotte's complexion this year. This team's not as bad as that record really indicates because they also did not have Miles Bridges. But realistically, Golden State regrets passing on LaMelo Ball for James Wiseman in that draft. And if Charlotte drafts Brandon Miller, they're making the same mistake, albeit maybe less severe. Still the same mistake. Draft Scoot Henderson. He's the best player available at this spot. He's the 2nd best player in the draft behind Victor Wembanyama. I have never wavered in that. No one else should. And I think that it is a real disservice around what happens around these G League Ignite guys because, to be honest, the average fan watches more college basketball than they do G League Ignite basketball. And I'm not saying that, oh, they need to watch more G League Ignite, but they just have to remember that these guys are still playing games and making an impact. And Scoot Henderson was fantastic this year, had a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio in the G League. Very tough to do, especially on a team like the G League Ignite where the structure and scheme isn't necessarily the forefront of importance for them. They're more focusing on skill development. Scoot Henderson still was pretty successful guiding the ship for this team, and I think Charlotte's getting a really darn good player here, 2nd overall, which is exactly what they need to do. Moving into pick number 3, we have the Portland Trailblazers now at this spot. Of course, a massive trade spot, but the more and more and more I think about this, the more likely I find it that they do not trade this selection. Joe Cronin, their GM, and their assistant GM, Mike Schmitz, both have long-term contracts with the organization. I don't see it very likely at all that they rush this thing and try to build some high-end contender or some team that can push their chips in right now to win when they have all the security in the world moving forward. Their goal is to be really, really good for a very long time. And I think if they select here, they're putting themselves in a position to do that. And pick number 3, with how much talent there is in this draft, can still be a really good tool for you to upgrade your roster and add a nice young player who I do think can have an impact pretty quickly into his career. And that is, of course, Brandon Miller. I don't want to sound like a Brandon Miller hater. I think Brandon Miller is very good at a lot of things. He's a fantastic spot-up shooter. He can knock shots down off the dribble. He's an improving playmaker. I still have severe questions about his finishing at the rim at the NBA level. I think he's going to struggle quite significantly. He also shoots no mid-range jump shots currently. That's a byproduct of the system there at Alabama, so you can't necessarily pin that completely on Brandon Miller, but it is an element to consider that he just doesn't have experience shooting mid-range jump shots up to this point. I believe less than 2% of his actual points this season for Alabama were on long twos. So, you know, that's kind of the way the NBA is trending anyway, so you can't really fault him too much for that, but it is something to consider. You look at the star players in the league right now, they all score in the mid-range. You think about Kawhi, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, all of them score in the mid-range area some way or some form. Brandon Miller does not do that. I don't think Brandon Miller is going to be a superstar. I think really he's going to be a Brandon Ingram type player where maybe a couple-time All-Star. That's still a really good comp. In fact, I actually tweeted the comparison between them statistically in college. Now, one big difference, Brandon Miller was shooting significantly more threes, so his points per game are a little bit higher. The splits are a little bit different between the two, but Brandon Miller did have a fantastic freshman season, for the Alabama Crimson Tide, very similar to Brandon Ingram's freshman season back when he played, I believe, in 2015. So I think that realistically, you can look at Brandon Miller as a really nice selection. 3rd overall, you're getting a guy who does have pretty good upside, but still a relatively high 4.2. He can help your team right now while also still being a good player to build around for the future. Even if it doesn't mean winning a title with Damian Lillard, I think the Blazers are not in a position to really consider themselves a team likely to win the title anyway if they were to make a trade. The only type of trade I would consider is maybe moving down to pick number 7 or somewhere in that range to maybe pick up more assets. Like, again, if I'm trading here with, say, the Indiana Pacers who have pick 7, I'd maybe be willing to move down from 3 to 7, try and pick up Miles Turner in the process, get off of Yusuf Nurkic's contract, and kind of adjust the books that way a little bit and upgrade while still keeping a top 10 pick in this draft. I would consider that, but again, I'm not saying I would commit to that right now, and I'd have to do some really strong thinking on that before saying I'm going to 100% do that. But I think trading out of pick 3 completely, trading out of the top 10 completely would be a pretty big mistake, and honestly a long-term disaster for the Portland Trail Blazers. Pick number 4, the Houston Rockets, another team where there's some trade discussions around pick number 4. Again, I think it would be a massive failure to trade this selection unless it was for Jalen Brown. For some reason right now, with the Boston Celtics losing in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, there's this overreaction of how, oh, well, the Celtics probably have to trade Jalen Brown now and they don't want to pay him the Supermax. Listen to me here. Okay, Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum are on the exact same timeline. The Boston Celtics win a ton of games every single year. They were just in the finals last year. Yes, they came up a little bit short. They were one win away from the finals this year. I know Jalen Brown did not have a great series, but you can't just pin every single thing on one little player. And to be honest, Malcolm Brogdon missing a good amount of that series for Boston is probably just as impactful as some of Jalen Brown's poor play. So, if you want to sit here and say trade Jalen Brown, I might have a video up on the channel about that. I am by no means of the opinion that they actually should. So if the Houston Rockets could snag him, it's 100% a no-brainer. But if they stick here, they go with a player that I really do like a lot in Amen Thompson. I know the Rockets themselves and the Rockets fans felt like it was a massive failure, having the second worst record in the league, tied with the Spurs, and then falling down to 4th through the lottery. It just felt really negative for this team because you wanted a top 3 pick. You definitely wanted a top 2 pick in this year's draft, and now they find themselves picking at 4. But I think this could really be good for them long term because I do think Amen Thompson, there's a legitimate case that he could be a better player than Brandon Miller and a comparable player to Scoot Henderson in the next 5 to 6 years. Currently, he is significantly worse than them, and I have questions about how well he's going to perform early on in his career. Trust me, this by no means accelerates Houston's rebuild. In fact, it maybe even delays it a little bit because I do think Amen Thompson is going to take a little bit of time to adjust to the NBA game because currently at Overtime Elite, playing for the City Reapers, it's a different game. Okay, the help defense isn't really there. It's a lot of transition. It's just not really good, slow, high leverage basketball is the way I want to put this. And his shooting is dreadful right now. It 100% is. You cannot sit here and try and defend his shooting. Now, the only thing you can really say is it's very small sample size. He played 19 games this year for Overtime Elite, I believe. So a 19-game sample size shooting the basketball is not very substantive. Okay, if he made 3 more threes, his 3-point percentage rises by like 8% or something. So it's very, very small sample size. That's really the only way to defend it. The actual mechanics of the shot are not good. The results from the shots on the data that we do have are not good. But the one thing he's really good at is getting to the rim and knowing what to do out of that situation. He's a fantastic advantage creator. He's got a very electric live handle. He can get downhill. He can beat guys one-on-one, which is the toughest thing to do in all of basketball, is to beat a guy who's sitting in a stance trying to stay in front of you. Amen Thompson does that all of the time. He is a fantastic downhill threat. He puts a lot of pressure on the rim, and he's also somebody who I really believe could be one of the best passers from this draft. If not the best passer, he's definitely in the top 2 or 3 discussion with other guys like Scoot Henderson and Anthony Black. When it comes to facilitating the basketball, he's a natural dump-off passer, very good there. He's also really good as a lob passer. And I think he just understands that, hey, I can put a lot of pressure on the rim is his thought process. And out of that, if I force help rotations, I can make the right play out of this. He does that a lot. Now he's pretty turnover prone right now. He throws some wild passes, tries to fit the ball into tight windows. But I do think long-term that if you coach him up a little bit and he takes steps forward in every single area of his game, just a little bit, step by step, and then that shooting comes along with maybe refined shot mechanic, then you're looking at Houston getting a home run steal here and a guy who could realistically be a top 3 player in this draft when it's all said and done. And I firmly 100% believe that's a real possibility. Pick 5, the Detroit Pistons here now, and Detroit's really been the sweet spot in these mocks where I have to sit here and think. Every time I compile a mock, it takes me hours and hours and hours, and I sit here and I go through all the numbers again. I watch film on guys every single week, all the time, basically. I never step away from film, honestly. No matter what I'm doing in my life, it always seems like I've got film on. And I love it because it helps me kind of think through some things and consider all these possibilities. And Detroit's really been the one that each and every week, I'm like, ooh, do I like this? Do I like that? What am I going to do here? And for the third straight week, I'm mocking something different for the Detroit Pistons. And this is tied a little bit to some of the rumors on their potential new head coach. Currently, at the time I'm recording this, they do not have a head coach hired yet, but there has been a lot of rumors about Kevin Ollie being the future head coach of the Detroit Pistons. And for anyone who does not know, he is currently associated with Overtime Elite. Well, actually not anymore, because he stepped down from his position. And there's a lot of rumors that he will become the next head coach of the Detroit Pistons. And to me, that brings in a tie to Ausar Thompson, the twin brother of Amen Thompson, who went 4th overall. And in this mock, they go back-to-back, 4th and 5th overall. Some people prefer Ausar Thompson over Amen Thompson, and they're going to reference three-point shooting. I would not listen to that very much. Again, this is very small sample size. He shot 18 more three-pointers than Amen Thompson this past year for Overtime Elite for the City Reapers, and he only made 8 more. So he shot a decent amount more. He also made a little bit more. So it's not like there's a massive change between the two guys. Their form looks very, very similar. They have very similar shooting mechanics. Like, really, there was one game for him against the Cold Hearts, which is another team in Overtime Elite, where he started the game 4 for 4 from 3. And if you have 2 of those, rattle out of the rim or whatever, the shooting percentage looks very eerily similar. So you can't just sit here and tell me that Ausar Thompson's a significantly better shooter than Amen Thompson, because there's really no significant data behind that. There's like some data that suggests that, but I very small sample size, I just don't buy it. But Ausar Thompson is very good at a lot of things, and he's very similar to his brother in a lot of ways, because he is a pretty interesting prospect when it comes to the physical profile. He's 6'7". He jumps out of the gym, one of the best leapers in this year's draft. He also is very, very good at finishing plays as a lob finisher. He's fantastic in transition when he's in advantage opportunities, whether that's a 3-on-2, a 4-on-3, 2-on-1s. He's one of the better players in this draft because he has a physical advantage that other players just oftentimes cannot match up. If you're ranking him percentile wise in athleticism, he's probably in the 98th percentile for all NBA players. He is that incredible of an athlete. He's a blur. He's extremely fast. He's quick. He knows what to do with the basketball around the rim, and he's also an intriguing passer. He's actually a pretty good breakout passer. Now, there have been moments where he misses cutters and sometimes gets caught with his head down dribbling the basketball, but there is moments too where you think, hey, this guy could really develop as a playmaker, and he's probably not going to be a guard like Amen Thompson. He's not going to be someone you put the ball in his hands as much, but I think he could be a really, really good connector. And I think the long-term upside is he could be a fantastic point of attack defender who can also cut off the ball and do a lot of different things for you offensively. Detroit, the combination of him and Jaden Ivey gives Cade Cunningham a lot of fun cutting options around him. And also with Jalen Duren, they just have a lot of physical size, strength, athleticism that other teams are going to struggle to match up with. Pick 6, the Orlando Magic now at this spot. And I'm going to tell you right now, I really love the outcome of this mock draft for the Orlando Magic. And starting with 6th overall, we're going with Cam Whitmore, a player who everyone in the NBA right now, league circles, everything I'm hearing, there's a lot of buzz around Cam Whitmore based on how his pro day went just this past week. He had a very good pro day, and physically, I've been talking about this for years, and especially this draft with Cam Whitmore. I've mentioned it a ton of times throughout this season, that Cam Whitmore is going to be a player that impresses people in a one-on-one workout. And when he gets into a gym with a whole bunch of decision makers, they're going to look at his body and they're going to say, this guy's a very NBA ready body. He's strong. He's physical at 6'6". He's a fantastic straight line driver of the basketball. He's got a lot of power on his finishes. He jumps out of the gym. He posted an incredible vertical at the draft combine. I don't think anyone was surprised by that. In fact, the film suggests he was going to do that. He's got really good history in terms of long-term tape for what he posted for FIBA U19 play with Team USA. He had a fantastic run, ended up winning basically the Summer League MVP of that FIBA run. And he was just very, very good. He's had a really long track record of being successful and being a high-end draft prospect. Before the year, a lot of people looked at him as a top 5 pick. Clearly not far off now, going 6th overall in this mock draft. And he's flashed enough shot making to keep teams interested. I think the biggest issue with his game right now is when he's slashing, he doesn't really have his head up as much, and he's not making the right play as frequently as you would like him to. And for me, it's a little reminiscent of Jalen Brown, because he's a little reliant on his slashing and natural physical ability and his ability to bruise through guys and play physically in a way that maybe isn't the most skilled or finesse game. And I think there are going to be some adjustments he has to make, especially playing for Orlando, where next to Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, you already have some nice physical talent. You have some nice guys who can get downhill. Now, I think Paulo and Franz are significantly more advanced as passers than where Cam Whitmore currently is, of course. But again, I think the comp for him is Jalen Brown. I think that there is some really good long-term upside. Jalen Brown's an all-star level player. I think Cam Whitmore could potentially grow into that. Orlando's done a great job overseeing the development of wings over the last few years. And I think that they're in a position with Jamal Mosley as their coach to continue to do so. It's just about, is this team willing to do that? Is this team ready to try and take a step forward, or are they willing to maybe spend one more year in developmental mode and seeing how Cam Whitmore could fit into their team? Remember, they still have a pick at 11. I know shooting is a big need. I'm going to tell you right now, we didn't address that as much in this mock draft for Orlando, but they do have cap space this offseason. That's kind of the way I'm assuming they would look to solve that issue if they go with the route that they end up going with in this mock draft. Pick 7, here's that Indiana Pacers pick that I referenced earlier, talking about the Portland Trailblazers. And at 7, I think Indiana's really ecstatic about what ended up happening here and who ended up falling to them, because they really do like this player a lot. And it's a player I know a lot of Pacers fans would love to see in Indiana, and that is, of course, Jarace Walker from Houston. He's a talented four-man, and typically in most drafts, I feel like I've said this in a lot of the mock drafts, but I want to reiterate it. Jarace Walker is a player who in a normal class would go top 4, top 5. Think about where DeAndre Hunter went. Think about some of those types of players. Patrick Williams, for example, both of those two were top 4 picks in their drafts. There's a lot of value placed on players of this position, of this physical frame and skill set, and Indiana's getting him at 7 here. It's a huge steal, and I would even argue that Jarace Walker is a better prospect than those players were, because I think defensively he's a little bit more lateral. I think he's more fluid laterally in space specifically, and I think he gives Indiana a little bit more defensive versatility into their front court, which is what they really badly need. Next to Miles Turner, of course, a great shot blocker, but I think they've been looking for kind of a true power forward and a true small forward to put around Tyrese Halliburton, and you're addressing one of those two forward spots with Jarace Walker, who offensively is also very skilled. He has the ball skills that I do think most people will rank him ahead on their own individual big boards, above a Taylor Hendricks and above an Anthony Black, because of some of the shot making, because of some of the ability he has as a downhill creator, the post fades, the physical strength that he possesses. It's going to pop off the screen to a lot of people watching and doing their own film studies. Now, for me, I'm a little bit lower on Jarace Walker than that. I prefer some of those other guys. I prefer Taylor Hendricks and Anthony Black at this current point in time. Now, I'm not saying that that's set in stone or concrete yet. I'm going to continue spending a little bit more time and finishing my evaluation on these guys in the next couple of weeks, where then I'll have my actual final big board release on the channel. But Jarace Walker, I do think, is a very good prospect and somebody that in a typical year is worth a top 5 pick. This draft is just so loaded, though. I've been on the record of saying I believe there's 9 top 5 level players in this draft. I 100% believe that. I also think roughly there's 40 top 30 level players, 40 first round grades in this draft or so. That's kind of more of a rough number than that 9 number for the top 5. And I think Jarace Walker, really good player, fits Indiana well, fits some of the things that they're needing. 6'8", 240 pounds. He's strong, physical, and he has the skill set to boot. And I think he's a fantastic fit next to Miles Turner. Defensively and offensively gives him another guy that can get his own shot and do it in a way different than what Indiana currently does, which is a little bit more mid-range jump shooting, which I think is a good thing for them. Pick 8, the Washington Wizards here now, and it's going to be interesting to see what Michael Winger does with this team. Of course, their new president of basketball operations, they brought him over from the Los Angeles Clippers, former GM over there. He has a very good track record of building good teams and being a part of high-level basketball discussion and the process of team building and bringing in star-level players. He helped build the Clippers into what has become a really good basketball product. Of course, Steve Ballmer being there definitely helps. But now his goal is going to be helping Washington kind of get out of this real NBA purgatory and building them into a high-end team and a team that could be a perennial playoff team and even maybe a title contender at some point. But he's got a long pathway to get there. And really, there's going to be a challenge of, okay, does he keep Porzingis and Kuzma or does he not? And for me, I don't have the intel yet to completely tell you 100% without a doubt that he's leaning one way or the other. I just do not have the insight onto that yet. I'm trying to get information on that, but it's going to probably take a little bit of time. So as of right now, I'm pretending that I know he's going to keep those two guys, that he's going to keep, or at least one of those two guys between Kuzma and Porzingis. And to be honest, if you just look at the roster, point guard is the biggest issue on this team right now. They have the shot creation around the point guard position. They just don't have the facilitator. And I think defensively, if they do keep Porzingis, this team has a variety of intriguing defensive players, specifically Deni Avdija and Kristaps Porzingis are the two guys that really come to mind. Daniel Gafford, of course, another good rim protector too that they have. I think Anthony Black would be a really great addition to the team, though, because he's a very smart player on both ends of the floor. He gets into the passing lanes. He knows how to be a help guy as a guard at 6'7". He's got the size to do it as well. He's got wing size at the point guard position. And I've seen a lot of comments about, oh, well, you know, he's not a non-ball creator as much. First of all, he's a fantastic pick and roll guard. Okay. He's got very high IQ and he knows what he's doing when he gets in a pick and roll. He plays with good pace. He understands when to drop it off to the big man, when to kind of be patient with it, get downhill a little bit, and then kind of freeze the drop big and then float the ball in over the top. He's a good lob passer. Really, Anthony Black is the total package as a guard outside of the three-point shooting. That's really the big concern. Now, he did have a good pro day for himself, knocked down a ton of shots, but I think the question still remains about his shot mechanics. Pretty slow release and kind of ugly looking in terms of the actual shot itself. Now, if the shot goes in, that's really all that matters in actual games. But there are some concerns there, of course. But I think every other thing that you need to be worried about as a guard, he takes care of that well. He's going to block some shots. He's very athletic. He's smart, understands what he's supposed to do, understands how to help the team win. He was really pivotal for Arkansas this past year, and I think without them, they would have had a significantly worse season just because Nick Smith Jr. was so in and out of the lineup for them. Anthony Black brought a ton of stability, both offensively and defensively for them. Projects to be a pretty good point of attack defender, and I think realistically, Washington needs some serious stability at the point guard position. They just haven't had that since John Wall first tore his Achilles. They need that again. They badly do, and I think with Bradley Beal on the roster, you can probably get by without some of that shot creation just because you have it already in your backcourt naturally. You just need to add a little bit more raw talent around it and a player who fits very well next to Bradley Beal. And I think Anthony Black, if you dreamt of a player to be a good fit next to Beal, Anthony Black's probably the guy you came up with in your mind. Pick 9, we have the Utah Jazz at this spot. And Utah, it's an interesting spot for them because you think about their two build-around players that they currently possess on their team. That is, of course, Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler. You can maybe throw Ochai Agbaji into that grouping because I know they really like him. Colin Sexton, of course, is under contract for a while. And you think, okay, maybe the front court's a little bit filled out. As I said earlier, I believe there's 9 top 5 players in this draft. 9 guys worthy of top 5 consideration. And that 9th guy in this mock is Taylor Hendricks. And you might say, well, this isn't really what they need. They have a center. They have, you know, kind of this forward who has played power forward, played a little bit of small forward throughout his career. He's done a little bit of both. Taylor Hendricks projects to be a 4 who can play some small ball 5. So how does that fit in? For me, if I'm Utah, first of all, I traded Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. I'm not really worried about fit for the year 2024, okay? I'm more so worried about accruing talent, adding in good players, and figuring out fit later, which is something Danny Ainge is very famous for. Danny Ainge also really likes to draft big wings who can impact the game positively, and I think that Taylor Hendricks is one of the perfect examples of a 3-and-D player in today's modern era, because not only is he 3-and-D, he's 3 and hybrid defense. And what I mean by that is he can guard on the perimeter, but he's also a fantastic shot blocker and a really good player who's going to have some anchor capabilities to him. Now, I don't think he's going to anchor a defense for 82 games a year, 36 minutes a night. But what I do think is for maybe 10, 15 minutes that Walker Kessler's out of the game while Taylor Hendricks is in, can you play him at center and get away with it? I 100% think you can. Now, year one might be a little rough, okay? It's not going to be like, oh, year one, this rookie's going to come in and be, you know, a lockdown defender and anchor the best defense in the league. I'm not suggesting that year one. But he's got the traits, he's got the skill set that maybe year 2, year 3, year 4, as he kind of gets caught up to the tempo of the NBA and the pace of play and the style that they're going to try and run in Utah with Will Hardy calling the shots. I think there's a good chance that he becomes a fantastic small ball 5 and one that has really good impact on winning basketball, especially given the fact he shot 39% from 3. He's got an ability to attack closeouts. He's very athletic. Because of that, if you put a center on him defensively, he's going to stretch you out a little bit. He's going to knock down perimeter shots. He's going to attack those aggressive closeouts, and he's going to know what to do at the rim when he gets there, because he's able to finish the ball. And that's a huge thing for Utah. I think that, again, it's all about talent acquisition. And to me, Taylor Hendricks, it's a no-brainer. This is the player you want to draft here if you're Utah, and you just you walk it up to the podium and you're very happy about it because you got a good player. And realistically, with where this team is, the amount of draft assets they have, they can always adjust their roster later for fit. I think right now it's about adding value, and that's what Taylor Hendricks does. Pick 10, we have my Dallas Mavericks now at this spot, and pick 10's always been the toughest spot to mock. I talked about pick 5, how difficult that is. I think that Detroit's a really interesting team at 5, but I think Dallas is even a more challenging team at 10, because if you want to draft off of need, you have to ask yourself, which one are we addressing? Because there are significant needs on this team. First of all, the team's not very good at shooting the basketball, and that's really tough to do around Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, because you have two fantastic shot makers, shot creators, who also draw a lot of gravity and attention, and bring in a defense and allow a lot of easy kickouts for open shots. And Dallas still isn't that great of a shooting team around that. So first of all, that's an issue. Secondly, this team has zero rim protection. That's a massive issue. I've been talking about that for a long time. Christian Wood was the best rim protector on the team, and yet Jason Kidd felt uneasy playing him for reasons I can't really explain. This team can't rebound the basketball. Christian Wood, I would argue, was their best rebounder as well, outside of Luka Doncic. And again, he wasn't willing to play him, again, for reasons I can't explain. And then the fourth issue is they don't really have a skilled player on the wing or in the front court that you can consistently trust. Josh Green took a big step forward. I just think overall this team, they need more athleticism, they need more shot blocking, they need more rebounding, and they need more shooting. And you can't really address that all in one pick, to be honest with you, at pick number 10 in this draft. So I landed on Dereck Lively, who I talked about how much buzz there is around Cam Whitmore in the league right now because of his pro day. The only player with more buzz around him currently from a pro day performance is Dereck Lively, because there was a lot of questions about what his offensive role would be and what's his long-term upside offensively. Because defensively, people know what he's going to do. He's going to block a ton of shots and he can rebound the basketball. And offensively, it kind of was perceived that, hey, maybe he's at most a screen and roll guy and he might catch some lobs, similar to what we thought about Isaiah Jackson a few years ago before the Indiana Pacers drafted him in the first round. Remember, he went in the 20s. So this is a significant change. And at his pro day, he caught fire behind the three-point line. And there's some thought right now, groupthink, suggests that that's maybe something he could have showcased at Duke this past year, but he didn't have the green light to do so. Which for me, I'm not sure if I fully believe that, because John Shire let Kyle Filipowski shoot a bunch of threes this year. And I don't think that Dereck Lively was told, no, you're not shooting. I just think that maybe it's something Dereck Lively did work on. And I also do think that it is a lot easier to shoot 1-0 in the gym. There's been times where I catch fire and make 10 straight when I'm playing basketball myself. And I'm not an NBA draft prospect, I'll tell you that. So with Dereck Lively, yes, he's a 7'1" player. I do think that there is some real good reasoning as to why he should maybe be the 10th overall pick if Dallas were to keep this selection, regardless of the three-point shooting, because he provides the rim protection, the rebounding, and the athleticism at the position. He's a really good lob threat who can put pressure on the backside of the rim if you want him to do that, which are all things Dallas doesn't really have a ton of right now anyway. But the shooting is just a plus, and I do think it raised a lot of eyebrows. I do think it cut a lot of intrigue for teams around the league and executives and some scouts that had not seen him shoot yet in person. I do think that did really garner a lot of respect for what he could potentially become, and because of that, he significantly helped his stock at the draft combine and during pro days, and because of that, he's now in that top 10 consideration once again, like where he was before the year started in my way too early mock draft for this season. Pick 11, we're back on to Orlando now. Remember, at 6 we went with Cam Whitmore. And I think 11, everyone's going to assume shooter here, because I've been mocking shooters pretty consistently 11th overall to Orlando, and there are some very good options here. You could consider a guy like Gradey Dick. You could consider a guy like Jordan Hawkins. Both of them really good options for what Orlando could potentially use, and I wouldn't hate those picks on draft night. In fact, I would really welcome them, because Orlando was a very bad shooting team. They finished bottom 10 in both three-pointers attempted per game and actual team three-point percentage. So they need another guy who's going to put up three-pointers, and they need another guy who's going to actually cash them in as well. But I decided to not go that route here, because I went with another player who I just think is a fantastic option, and that is Cason Wallace out of Kentucky. I really, really like this kid. He plays off of 2 feet pretty consistently. He's got really good balance to his game. He can knock down shots on all 3 levels, albeit somewhat irregular right now from the mid-range, but he's got it in there. And I think the 3-point shot still has to take some steps forward. But the big question for Orlando right now, they're loaded at the guard position. And can they afford to take another pick? Because they have Cole Anthony, they have Markelle Fultz, they have Jalen Suggs. And I think the argument for me is you don't let good become the competitor with great. And I think that there's a chance Cason Wallace could really become great. He's got the most active hands in the class. He's a very smart, intuitive defender. I think back to a game against Michigan State earlier this year where he finished the game with 7+ steals. He actually had a tie-up as well at the end of the game where he basically sealed the deal for them against the Spartans by tying up a big man as a help defender. And just there's winning plays every single time you turn on the film for Cason Wallace. That's just so impressive. He's such an intuitive player defensively. And I think you think about Orlando and all the things that they currently have and the amount of physical size and strength and some of the defensive capabilities they're going to continue to grow into as they get a little bit older and defensively. I think Cason Wallace doesn't miss a beat stepping in with the Orlando Magic, and you can build this really competitive roster that has a whole bunch of strong physical players who know how to play and play the game the right way. And I think Cason Wallace would contribute to that while you still have money to go out, sign a free agent who can knock down perimeter shots, and you can add to your shooting that way. Maybe you can go out and make a trade for a guy like Duncan Robinson, who, yes, I know it's a negative contract a lot of people perceive, but for the Miami Heat who are in the finals, he's been really pivotal for them. Maybe it's not Duncan Robinson, but another shooter like that, someone who could be a really nice movement shooter and give you some options without having to spend a lottery pick to do so. I think everything should be an option currently for Orlando, and I really like Cason Wallace. His hand positioning defensively is fantastic, very reminiscent of Kawhi Leonard. I do not like comparing prospects to Kawhi Leonard. I'm not saying Cason Wallace will be the next Kawhi Leonard, but when I watch Cason Wallace maneuver a screen, I kind of get chills down my spine a little bit because I'm like, that looks kind of like Kawhi Leonard, which is pretty scary and a pretty good reason to take him 11th overall. Pick number 12, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder at this spot, and for OKC, these picks have varied throughout the year. We've thought about Gigi Jackson, Leonard Miller, Ryan Rupert. Who could we possibly consider here? And with Grady Dick falling down past the Orlando Magic, it felt like a no-brainer to me for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I know right now, Thunder fans are going to already be typing saying, hey, this team identity is guys who can dribble, pass, shoot. And I 100% agree with that. Sam Presti's done a fantastic job building this team so far after pivoting off of both Paul George and Russell Westbrook. I 100% agree that that's what he's been doing. But I think with the emergence of Isaiah Joe this year, I think we saw how dynamic and how good a pure shooter could be on that lineup. Because you have a whole bunch of guys who, like you said, can dribble, pass, shoot. They can get downhill. They can get to spots on the floor. They can draw in a defense, force rotations, put a defense into scramble mode. And from there, if you have a guy who can pay it off consistently, like Grady Dick, who shot above 40% from 3 for Kansas, it's an awesome, awesome selection. And he's going to fit right in because now the Isaiah Joe minutes are going to stay the Isaiah Joe minutes, and you're going to have an uptick in performance even because Grady Dick is a better player than Isaiah Joe. And listen, I was really high on Isaiah Joe coming out of Arkansas. I was in disbelief when the 76ers cut him. I'm one of the biggest Isaiah Joe fans on the planet. I'm a stan even, I would say. But Grady Dick's just better than him. And I think Grady Dick is going to be a fantastic addition to whatever team gets him. Oklahoma City would be doing themselves a huge favor by landing this selection. It's going to help space the floor out even more for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Jalen Williams is going to help space the floor for Chet Holmgren when he's driving the basketball. They're going to have a really dynamic team, and I think Grady Dick does impact the game in a lot more ways than just catching and shooting. Okay, he can run a pick and roll, albeit to a small extent right now. I think he's going to be really good off of dribble handoffs, which I think is something that we're going to see Oklahoma City do a decent amount with Chet Holmgren once he's healthy and back in the lineup. And then he also crashes the offensive glass very well. And because of that, I think he's a more complete player than what a lot of people assume. And I think Oklahoma City's in a position where adding a guy who can pay off good driving kicks is a perfect scenario for them at 12. Pick 13, the Toronto Raptors here now. And Raptors fans are probably sitting here with their popcorn anticipating and waiting for this selection because in a lot of my mocks, I've really loved the Cason Wallace to Toronto fit. It just feels like something Masai Ujiri would do. But as you know, Cason Wallace is off the board. So where does Toronto go from here? with Cason Wallace off the board, what is really the best option for them? And I landed on Jalen Hood-Schifino from Indiana. And I think a lot of people who've watched Jalen Hood-Schifino play are really going to like this selection. He is a cerebral player with prototypical size. He's a good athlete. I think a very underrated athlete. Now, he might not jump out of the gym, but he's got the competitive athleticism that you need to be a good NBA player and even maybe blossom into an NBA All-Star. I think he's got the frame, the size, the physical capabilities to do that, and I think he's got the brain that could potentially match that too. And Toronto's a great place to see that develop. I know some Raptors fans are going to say we don't have quite the same developmental infrastructure we used to have. I completely understand that. It's not like you guys are producing players out of the Raptors 905 every year like you used to, but I'm telling you right now, Jalen Hood-Schifino is not going to spend a lot of time with the Raptors 905, if any at all, and it's because he's a really polished player who is still relatively young. He's a freshman coming out of Indiana. With that prototypical size, he rises up into his mid-range shot very well. He's really an adept pick and roll ball handler because not only does he operate well out of that initial screen, he also knows how to reject a screen. He knows how to use a screen and then re-screen to get to where he really wanted to go to begin with. And because of that, he gives Toronto a lot of flexibility around Jakob Poeltl, who's going to be their long-term center. Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. are both free agents this offseason, so the backcourt does need at least some addition. I'm assuming that both of them could potentially be gone. Now, it's possible they keep one or both of them there in Toronto too. That is a realistic possibility, although I see it kind of difficult for them to retain Fred VanVleet this offseason for something less than a huge number. So because of that, I think they might be hunting point guard, and that's why I landed on Jalen Hood-Schifino, who's also a really good downhill passer and just overall a very good player that I think is going to end up having a very nice career. And teams are going to be wondering, how did this guy go 13th overall? Because he's going to have a very good career ahead of him. Pick 14, the New Orleans Pelicans now at this spot, a team that I think will actively hunt trading this pick for a star level player or a player near star level, maybe an OG Anunoby from the Toronto Raptors, who we just talked about. And at 14 here, I do have the Pelicans, if they were to keep the pick, kind of taking that swing on upside. Now, Nick Smith Jr. did have a really poor year for himself at Arkansas, but there's good reasons as to why. He was dealing with a knee injury, never really showcased who he was or who he was going to become at the college ranks because he just never found that rhythm, was in and out of the lineup a lot, like I mentioned earlier when I was discussing Anthony Black. And I think realistically for this team, New Orleans doesn't need him to be a contributor in year one, because I don't think he's going to be a big-time contributor. And in fact, he's going to have to spend a little bit of time down in the G League, which I don't think that is a bad thing. You know, there's always this kind of connotation with, oh, this guy's going to play in the G League affiliate. That's a little weird. We drafted him in the lottery. First of all, a lot of guys spend time in the G League right now. I think it's a really great developmental path. It allows guys to be featured, have them work on certain skills in game-like repetitions, which is very important. Otherwise, you just end up sitting on the bench and you're not playing as much, but you're not really getting the reps to improve. That's the whole point of the G League, is to let these guys go out there, get improvement time. Remember, it used to be called the D League for development. It was the developmental league. And I think the Pelicans here, Nick Smith Jr. needs a little bit of time to develop. He shot under 40% from three, under 40% from the field, and under 40% from three. He had a very inefficient year playing off of a knee injury. Now, again, I don't think that's fully indicative of who he is, because I do think he has really good touch as a perimeter scorer. Right now, I would classify him probably as a two-level scorer. He's going to score predominantly in the mid-range or the three-point shot because he is a little reliant on his floater. Now, he has a very, very good floater. I think he's going to be a unique downhill threat because of that, but I do think he has the length, size, athleticism to get to the rim more and live at the line a little bit by taking in contact. And I think that's a big change that he has to make in his game. Part of me wonders how much of that has to do with his knee. Was he not feeling comfortable driving into contact? And how much of that was just he's not comfortable driving into contact, period. And, you know, if you go back to his high school film, he did use a lot of that floater anyway. So maybe there is a little bit of question there of what's that real upside look like if he's not going to get to the rim? Does he only turn into a D'Angelo Russell type player at best? And if so, that doesn't feel as good. But I do think the upside is there as long as you give him time. You just can't expect him year one to be a 30-minute a game contributor. I don't really see that. Obviously, with what New Orleans did, pick 8 last year in Dyson Daniels, they don't have that high of expectations for guys. So Nick Smith Jr., give him time, let him develop, let him grow, and that's another interesting young prospect that New Orleans is going to continue to oversee the development of moving forward. Pick 15, we move on to the Atlanta Hawks at this spot. I really do like the direction of this team, especially if pick 15 pans out for them. I know some people are going to talk about DeJounte Murray and some of the issues. Listen, this team has good players, and they can always pivot out of this lineup if they want to by moving off of Trae Young. They could trade Clint Capella. Onyeka Okongwu would definitely draw some interest. John Collins is perennially on the trade block. This team has a lot of good stuff going for it. Now it's about trying to fill out this roster and add in some of the things that they're missing, because remember, just a few years ago, they were in the conference finals. Does that mean I could see them getting back there anytime soon? Maybe not. The NBA is very competitive right now, but they have a good competitive roster, and I think Quinn Snyder is going to lead this team in a positive direction, which is really the one thing I like, is I think Landry Fields got that right, the Quinn Snyder hire. And now we're going to add a piece that Quinn Snyder's really never coached something like this before, at least in his tenure with the Utah Jazz, and that's a high-end movement shooter, perhaps the best movement shooter in this year's draft, Jordan Hawkins, who also shot nearly 89% from the free throw line on about 4 attempts a game. So you just know flat out this guy can shoot the basketball, and that's exactly what he did for UConn, helped lead them to a national title with Andre Jackson Jr. kind of as his running mate for that team. And a lot of the scoring responsibility was on Jordan Hawkins. You might say, okay, title winner, he shoots the ball very well in an NBA game that is very predicated on the three-point line. How does he not go in the lottery for you? And I think one of the perfect examples is even some of his best games this year. Let's say he goes 6 of 10 from 3, he finishes the game 6 of 15 from the field. And if you couldn't do the math on it, that means he went 0 of 5 inside the arc. He was not a good inside the arc scorer this year. I think he struggles in traffic quite a bit. And because of that, I think his ceiling is significantly lower than where a lot of other people would naturally place him, because you watch some of the shot making, you say, wow, this guy can really fill it up. Yes, he can fill it up from the perimeter, but there are still some long-term drawbacks to what he's going to be able to do with the ball in his hands. And I just don't really see him as an on-ball creator at the NBA level for anyone else other than himself. And even then, it's kind of one-dimensional, because he's looking to get to his step back. He's looking to get to a fadeaway shot instead of getting to the rim and drawing contact and finishing there, even though he does have an intriguing athletic profile. And I think, you know, if you kind of adjust his game and teach him to play off of 2 feet, maybe you can get him there. But I just see that as a long pathway. The nice thing here, though, for Atlanta is they don't need him to be that. You have Trae Young, you have DeJounte Murray, you already have your 2 primary on-ball creators. Now, the one thing I have to say about this Atlanta team, the ball movement's not very good. And even though they have guys who get assists, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, they do so mostly by being downhill creators, self-creators in a lot of ways. And because of that, their offense is a little stagnant. And you can see that in their pass to assist percentage, because they actually ranked number 1 in the league, where they had the fewest passes per assist. And that might sound like a good stat, but it's really not, because it means the ball's kind of sticking. And that's going to be something you expect from Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, and that's okay. But instead of seeing ball movement, typically when you're trying to build an offense, you're looking for movement in some type of way, whether that's ball movement or player movement. And if Atlanta's not going to move the ball a ton, and if Trae Young's not going to be the guy who's going to be willing to run off screens and do all that dirty work when it comes to being a pin down screen guy and working up off the baseline and running off of staggers and just being kind of a high motion type of player, Jordan Hawkins will do that, because that's literally what he does. That's literally all he did at UConn. He was always running. He's in great condition because of that, and he knows how to do it. He was very good at it. And that's why I think Atlanta here, a team that's looking to add more movement into their team, they're going to need that. Utah, when Quinn Snyder was coaching them, a high ball movement team, they don't really have that. They don't have the pieces to do that in Atlanta. So because of that, they're going to have to focus on player movement, and Jordan Hawkins is going to be the guy who's going to be the number 1 player mover, kind of like what Kevin Huerter used to do for Atlanta. Pick 16, we're moving on to the Utah Jazz. Now, this pick comes from the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it's really the first draft pick that they have from this trade with Rudy Gobert. Now, of course, they did have Walker Kessler from that deal, who had a fantastic rookie season and all-rookie season, so they're already feeling good about where they're currently at, but now they should feel even better, because they're getting a really great prospect in Kobe Bufkin. Remember, at pick 9, we went Taylor Hendricks. Now we're kind of getting a guard into the mix. I really wanted to look at a guard at pick 9. I just couldn't really bring myself to that here for this mock, because I thought, hey, look, Utah's in a spot where it should be about talent. And Kobe Bufkin's kind of the perfect fit here, because he's not only a guard, but he's got the talent to potentially be a lottery pick. In fact, if I was drafting, I would really strongly consider him in the lottery, because I think he's got lottery-ish talent. There's a lot of good players in this draft, like I've talked about multiple times already in this video. And Utah gets one of those guys here in Kobe Bufkin, who, even when he's not the main scorer, he's going to connect very well. I think he's smart. He stays on his feet. He uses his pivots well. A lot of people are going to compare him to Jalen Brunson naturally. I don't think that's a very good comparison. I think the two of them are pretty different, but there are elements to Brunson's game that you do see in Kobe Bufkin. Now, I think he's a little bit more athletic, a little bit more physically gifted in terms of size and athletic profile than what Jalen Brunson possesses. I think his shot making is on a similar wavelength as well, though, as Brunson. So some of those comparisons do make sense. I think he's going to make a lot of smart plays. I think he's going to be a good, strong, impactful defender who he's going to use his physicality and his strength to his advantage. I think he's willing and up for the challenge to guard the other team's best player on occasion. Now, I don't think a team's going to ask him to do that as much at the NBA as what Michigan asked him to do that. But there's going to be times where teams need him to do that, and I think he's going to do a pretty good job. One area defensively that I think he has to improve, his screen navigation right now is pretty rough. Significantly worse than, say, a guy like Cason Wallace, who I raved about earlier. I think it's going to be a little bit of a development pathway for him improving in that regard and just being a better defensive player against the pick and roll as a guard, which there's an art to that, right? Not a lot of guards know that coming in, so it's not a huge knock against him, but I just wanted to mention it. But the nice thing is with Utah is, first of all, they're going to have a good rationale to work on him with that, because Walker Kessler is going to play so predominantly in the drop that's going to be a pretty heavy focal point for their team and their overall team scheme defense. So I think Kobe Bufkin is going to catch on pretty quickly in Utah, which I think is really good for him. And I think Utah's getting a heck of a player who offensively can fill a variety of roles for you. Pick 17, we're going on to the Los Angeles Lakers, and here we have Kris Murray going to the Lakers. Left-handed Keegan Murray is what a lot of people are going to call him. He looks just like his brother, plays very similarly to his brother. He's an opportunistic scorer, found the basketball in a variety of spots on the floor. He's good around the dunker spot. He's a nice backside cutter. He knows how to seal and post up, although at the NBA level, they're not going to ask him to do that very frequently, especially playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. The real reason he's going to be a high-value pick for the Lakers, he can knock down open shots. And I know that sounds like a really basic thing, and it's obvious. So, well, that's probably important to make open shots. Yeah, it is, especially when you're playing alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis. For what it's worth, I do not believe LeBron James is retiring. And I think that the Lakers need to go into this offseason looking for more size to match up with Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. They need to add more physicality, guys who can bump around and box out and secure boards. Kris Murray does that. But most importantly, that left-handed stroke we talked about earlier is really, really good at dropping the basketball in the hoop. And it's no surprise. Keegan Murray was such a fantastic three-point shooter as a rookie for Sacramento. In fact, he actually broke the rookie three-point record for most three-pointers made in a season. And Kris Murray probably won't break that record, but I think he's going to fill up the hoop quite a bit as well with three-pointers. Now, I think year one, he's not going to do a lot else other than knock down open shots and, make timely cuts and attack closeouts, but that's okay. That's all you really need him to do. And then from there, you can kind of work on some of that development, maybe add in a 1 or 2 foot or 1 or 2 dribble pull-up, I think is kind of the next area of improvement for him offensively. And then maybe, just maybe, if you feel like everything's going well, maybe you introduce him to handling the ball in the pick and roll a little bit, but I think that's a little too advanced for where he's currently at. So I think the Lakers, they're still getting a player that fits and it offers size for them. I think it's a really home run pick for them at this spot. Pick 18, we're going on to the Eastern Conference champion, Miami Heat. Huge congratulations to Miami. Just absolutely mind-blowing that an 8th seed is in the NBA Finals for the second time in NBA history. Just unreal. And they have pick 18 because their regular season record was not very good, and they now find themselves in a spot where, well, what do we do? Do we draft off of talent? Do we draft based off of fit? What's really the best thing to do? And here at this spot, I feel like they maybe get a swing on both of those things. For Miami, there's going to be some questions about Gabe Vincent. There's going to be some questions about, of course, Max Strus. Both of those two go toward free agency, kind of similar to the discussion we had on Toronto, who has a backcourt heading toward free agency. Miami finds himself in a similar spot too, but in addition to those two guys headed toward free agency, they have kind of contracts that right now I think a lot of people would perceive as negative contracts. Kyle Lowry, who I think's had a pretty nice postseason for himself, actually, and Duncan Robinson's had a fantastic postseason for himself. I think maybe they've bought back some of the value on those contracts and made them look not as bad, but there's some questions there of, are they going to be Miami Heat players for the long term? And what does that really look like? And I think Keyonte George could be a really nice addition because, first of all, he's a really athletic player, and I think his athleticism has been undersold. Now, he's not quite the vertical explosion type player. Now, he does have moments where he's flashed that throughout the lone season he spent at Baylor. But really, you're looking at a guy who has really shifty change of direction. All of a sudden, he's going right, and then he quickly veers, gets back to his left, and he opens himself up for a nice little 18-foot jump shot. And he's one of the best heat check players in the draft too, because when he's on fire, he's absolutely on fire, and he cannot miss a jump shot. And I think for Miami, one of the big things we look at this team, especially while they nearly blew that 3-0 series lead to the Boston Celtics, I think a lot of people realize, and this has been something I've been saying for years, the team is a little short on shot creation. They need one, maybe two more guys who can get off their own shot. Caleb Martin stepped up big time for this team. It's a fantastic story on development and internal progression, and really seeing a guy take steps forward in his own career. Caleb Martin, I just did not have that on my bingo card before the season started, but he's been really good this year for Miami throughout most of the season. And I think, obviously he's playing his best basketball right now. For Keyonte George, again, year one, you're probably not going to see him be a big time contributor. He's probably going to have to play for the Skyforce quite a bit in the G League circuit, but that's okay, because Miami, long term, they're looking at him to hopefully become a good contributor. Now, he shot under 40% from the field this year. The ups are really high, the downs are really low, so you might have to wait a little bit to see what you get from him. But if there's anything we've learned over the last 5 to 7 years, the Miami Heat have probably the best developmental pathway in the NBA, and if not the best, they're in the top 3. They do such a great job not only identifying talent, especially undrafted talent, but they do a great job developing and harnessing that talent into clear roles and succession pathways to see them actually work in the NBA. And I think Keyonte George, there's probably not a better landing spot for him than 18th overall for Miami. I know some people are going to say this feels low for him. Some people look at him as a lottery level player, a lottery grade. I myself am a little bit lower on him, but I think that, the ceiling for him is similar to another guy in Florida for, kind of the comparison to Cole Anthony and what maybe he could become. Can he mirror Cole Anthony's development, where Cole Anthony took a huge step forward this past season, posting career highs in field goal percentage? I believe his 3-point percentage was a career high. And then the hope is that by year 3 or year 4 of Keyonte George's career, we see similar growth, similar steps forward in that regard as well. Pick 19, we move on to the Golden State Warriors, who are soon to not be the defending champions anymore. And unfortunately for them, they could not get the job done this year. And I think there are a lot of questions about where this team could potentially go long term. But I landed on a player that I think is actually a really interesting fit with this organization, Leonard Miller. And typically I've kind of liked Trayce Jackson-Davis here. I think Trayce Jackson-Davis is a player I'd have a first-round grade on myself. I think he's going to be really good, but I do see it possible, just given his age, that some teams maybe do look other directions. And Leonard Miller is significantly younger. He is a fantastic rebounder, was really productive actually for G League Ignite this past season. Something you typically don't say with a lot of the G League Ignite players in general. I've already said that now about both him and Scoot Henderson. And those were really the two best players for the G League Ignite this season. Leonard Miller, if you flash back to his prep hoops days, he was kind of playing more of a playmaker, point forward type role with the ball in his hands a lot. And because of that, the film was not great, I would say. In fact, it was almost laughable at times, because there'd be plays where he's just out of control and he flashes a handle, he flashes passing ability. But I think if you ask him to do that all the time, there's going to be some really bad plays with it, where he throws the ball way out of bounds, or he's about 3 seconds late on a cut, or, he thinks something's going to happen, he anticipates something, and then throws the ball away because it didn't actually end up materializing. That happened a lot with him as a prospect a year ago. From where he was then to where he is now is one of the most remarkable night and day differences I've ever seen in a prospect from a one-year developmental standpoint. He looks like a completely different player. And it's because of partially a role change, but also just partially his own development. And it's really remarkable. I think that everyone should honestly go back and watch what he was and see what he is now. It's incredible. Leonard Miller has taken a huge step forward, and the Warriors are getting a really good player here. One thing Golden State's typically done pretty well around Steph Curry and Klay Thompson is they rebound the ball. Of course, Kevon Looney, Draymond Green, two really good players when it comes to impacting the game in that fashion. And I think that Leonard Miller could maybe be the successor there, because he does have that background of being kind of a playmaker. I think he could find similar success to what Draymond Green did. Now, I think it's going to be an adjustment period, because it's different spots of the floor and a different role than what Leonard Miller had playmaking experience in. But I think that, maybe the pathway's there. He's really strong, physical. He's got a good frame to him. He tested really well at the combine in terms of the physical measurements, was very, very tall with his shoes off, which I think was surprising to a lot of people. Even though he is a tall prospect, I think that people were a little surprised with how well he measured, and I think because of that, he's definitely moved his way up boards. For the most part this year, he'd been kind of a guy who hovered after pick 20 for me. Now it almost feels like he's a lock to be a top 20 selection at this spot of the process. Talking about pick 20, here's the Houston Rockets with the selection, and the Rockets are in a weird spot. Remember, we went with Amen Thompson earlier, and I think Ime Udoka would for sure love to grab some big men who can protect the rim and block some shots, but I think that you can maybe look and find that in free agency. There's some options out there for sure that you could consider. So instead, I landed here with Jett Howard, and I have pretty good reason as to why Jett Howard does make some sense for the Houston Rockets. And a good reason why is because he was actually spotted in his own Instagram wearing some Rockets gear. And there's some really big time speculation that he's been working out for the Houston Rockets for sure one time, perhaps twice. So the Rockets have had him in the facility, and also he was spotted in Houston again via his own Instagram. So people know that he's not only been in Houston for training, but he's also been spending some time in Houston, which makes you believe that maybe he's gotten a promise from the Houston Rockets that, hey, if you're available at pick 20, we'd like to take you. And it makes sense as to why. He's got a really intriguing skill set on the links. He's got a really quick handle. He can create space off the dribble, but he's also proven with some data points that he's a pretty good shot maker as a catch and shoot guy. Now, is he going to be an on-dribble, off-dribble self-creator? I don't see that as much, but I do think that there is the talent there to knock down some shots and make some good plays for himself and off of his teammates' drive and kick. Then I think Houston, if you look at Amen Thompson, he's going to be a really prolific drive and kick guy. You get a nice knockdown catch and shoot player in Jett Howard who can fit off of him. I think it's a really nice grab for the Houston Rockets at pick 20. Pick 21, we have the Brooklyn Nets, who also have pick 22. I think picks 21 and 22 are massive trade chips this offseason, but let's pretend that they're not going to trade them at this spot, and the Nets are going to look for long-term development, and then they're not going to try and pivot the assets that they got from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving into other star players. So under that notion, what could they look to draft? First of all, I like Bilal Coulibaly here, who I know a lot of people have really high grades on. In fact, kind of surprisingly high grades. I think if you watch full Mets 92 games, you're not going to be as high on him. But if you watch a lot of highlights, Bilal Coulibaly might seem like one of the best prospects in this year's draft. I think he's got really long-term intriguing upside. Now, currently with where he is, I just don't have as much confidence in saying I 100% know this guy's going to develop into a high-end player. But I do believe that there's been enough flashes, there's been enough evidence that maybe he could be that. And there's a few reasons as to why. He's got really great length for him. He's got a plus wingspan, no question about it. He's got arms that go on for days, as Jay Billis would say. And then outside of that, he's also a player who has really elongated strides. He makes transition look like a breeze. In fact, Victor Wembanyama himself posted on, I believe, Twitter saying, wow, only one dribble from the half-court line, which is exactly all that Bilal Coulibaly needed to get to the rim. He takes massive strides forward. You could argue he has the best Euro step in this year's draft class. He uses it very frequently, and not only does he Euro step to change direction laterally, he continues to take downhill strides with that Euro step. So he's still working downhill at a really rapid rate while being able to change direction laterally, which is something that there is a lot of intrigue around. And Bilal Coulibaly, defensively, he's going to be a playmaker, okay? I don't think he's going to sit down in his stance and be a stopper yet, but one interesting thing about Mets 92 and just the LNB in general, which is the league that both Victor and Bilal play in, that league, there's a lot of different scheme and a lot of different stuff that you see that's a little atypical in the NBA. For example, teams pick up full court pretty frequently, and they drop into zone a little bit more, and they do a lot of different things. It's almost reminiscent of how the Miami Heat play and how the Miami Heat have gotten to the finals this year. Bilal Coulibaly, now he's not going to the Heat with this pick, but he is going to a team that I think could use some of that long-term upside. And Coulibaly's a smart guy, smart player. I think he has to really work on his ball handling. Right now, he does a decent job splitting doubles. He's got the elements to it that in advantage situations, he looks really good. But there's also moments where he's just really loose with the ball. It doesn't look like he has full control of it. And because of that, it is a little bit of a concern for me. But the shot making's there. He has some pretty good data in terms of his field goal percentage, and some of the traditional counting stats suggest he's going to have a pretty nice career. And he is playing against pro players. So with all the negatives I said about Coulibaly, there's also a lot of positives to love. And I think 21 here is a really good, intriguing pick for the Brooklyn Nets. And they're going to look at 22 to follow it up with a selection here of Noah Clowney, because Jacques Vaughn, the one thing that he made clear in pretty much every single post-game presser this season was that this team doesn't rebound the ball very well and that they need to do a better job of it. So it's either just continue to point the fingers at your players or at least draft somebody who can rebound the basketball. And Noah Clowney rebounds it pretty well. He just kind of has a knack and an instinct to finding the basketball. He also can knock down the three-point shot. So maybe, just maybe, you could see him and Nick Claxton on the floor together. I wouldn't completely bet on that, though. In fact, I would probably bet against it pretty early on. But Noah Clowney, there is some long-term upside in terms of being a modern big. One thing in my mocks that I haven't given a lot of love to some of the other bigs in this process. You think about a Daron Holmes from Dayton. He's gotten a little bit of love. I, of course, love Trace Jackson Davis, Mohamed Gay from Washington State, you could argue for. He's an intriguing big. You could also look at maybe a guy like James Najee from FC Barcelona. All of those guys could be in consideration here for Brooklyn. Really, they're looking for size. So it comes down to which one they individually prefer. I opted for Clowney here because I think maybe his fit next to Claxton long-term is a little bit more possible than those other players. But at the end of the day, you could make an argument for any of them, and there'd be legitimate thoughts as to why that's a realistic possibility. Pick 23, we have the Portland Trailblazers at this spot. This pick comes from the New York Knicks in the Josh Hart trade that was executed this past trade deadline. And 23rd overall, I actually have the Blazers going with Bobi Klintman here out of Wake Forest, which is a pretty unique selection and pretty different from what we've typically looked at for Portland. Bobi Klintman, there's a lot of speculation right now that he received a first-round promise. And you look at his production level for Wake Forest, and it wasn't very high. But he did flash a lot of traits that are pretty intriguing. Defensively, made a lot of plays, blocked some shots, stole the basketball quite a bit, and he has the frame to become a pretty good, versatile defender, whether that's out on the perimeter, impacting some shots as a help side guy, does a little bit of everything there, which is partially why it already makes some sense for Portland to consider. Offensively, knocked down some three-point shots. The three-point percentage isn't going to suggest he's a very good three-point shooter. I think there's going to be areas to grow, but he just has a pretty good feel of the game. And even though the traditional counting stats aren't there, sometimes it doesn't have to be. Sometimes when you watch a player, you can just tell that, hey, they get it or they don't. And I think Bobi Klintman is somebody who arguably gets it. And I think Portland is a team that, with their history, with where, Mike Schmidt specifically, the amount of time he spent with prospects and working around the world, looking at guys and evaluating them well before they get to college, Bobi Klintman's a guy who he would have on his radar, especially with this pick. I've been talking about for a Bobi Klintman selection, you're looking at teams that have multiple first-round picks probably that made a promise to him of, hey, if you're there at this pick, we'd like to take you. I've thought about Utah. I thought about Indiana. This time I landed on Portland because of some of Mike Schmidt's background, his understanding of what the development track has looked like for some of these guys, and Bobi Klintman's definitely an interesting name to keep on Portland's radar going forward. Pick 24, the Sacramento Kings now at this spot. In Sacramento, there's a few different ways to look. You could maybe argue, hey, this team needs more defense, which is definitely true. But, hey, they were the most efficient offense in the league. Why not add a little bit more firepower? I just couldn't bring myself to actually going that way. I opted here for Ryan Rupert. And part of the reason I feel pretty confident in that is I know Monty McNair is looking for a little bit more defensive playmaking capability. They had targeted Matisse Thybulle last year during the season at the trade deadline, looking for kind of a versatile defender who could block some shots and make some plays defensively. I think Matisse Thybulle's an overrated defender. He's had some moments, right? He's somebody who's willing to be up for the challenge. It's just, he's not necessarily a sit down and guard type of guy. He's more of a, hey, I'm going to try and block your shot and gamble on some stuff and see if I can get some steals and some blocks, which he does a decent job of. And I think Ryan Rupert is a little similar to that, but I think he's actually a better sit down and guard type of player than what we saw from Matisse Thybulle so far in his career. And one thing about him, he's not going to block as many shots as Thybulle has in his career. But the one thing I know that Rupert is going to do really well is he's going to pick people's pockets almost Haywood Highsmith style. And he's going to say cookies every time he takes it from you because he picks up 94 feet. He's going to do that quite a bit. He did that for the New Zealand Breakers in the NBL this past year quite a bit. And he's really confident 35, 45, 50 feet away from the hoop of, hey, I know I'm big, lengthy, and athletic. I can gamble out here and I can try and poke the ball from you. And if you beat me, I've got enough court length to get back on defense and defend anyway. And because of that, it's going to empower him to not only gamble for steals, and he's going to get a good number of them because he's got a pretty good talent of doing so with his active hands. But outside of that, it gives Sacramento an ability to maybe drain some shot clock, because both him and Davion Mitchell are able to pick up the full length of the court. And because of that, maybe a team gets it across the timeline at 18 seconds left in the shot clock instead of 20 or 21. And those 2 or 3 seconds might not sound like a big deal, but you think about how many times a team in the last second or two gets a nice shot off. All of a sudden, one more extra pass, and with 1 or 2 seconds left in the shot clock, they end up getting an open three. I think Sacramento, we saw that a decent amount this year, where just at the end of the shot clock, a team was just able to find the right look. If you can drain a little bit more shot clock prematurely, maybe it helps your defense overall in totality. And 24 is going to be hard to address all your needs defensively. I'm not saying they're going to be able to do that, but repair definitely does help to a certain extent. 25, we move on to the Memphis Grizzlies, who really knows how this team's going to look. Of course, no Dylan Brooks. Ja Morant, we'll see how long he's suspended for. My guess is at least a 20-game suspension that will make him ineligible for any All-NBA team selection next year with that new 65 games played minimum. So Memphis, they find themselves in an interesting spot, 25th, of what do they really look for and what do they consider. I landed on Dereck Whitehead here, who there's a narrative running around right now, and partially because of Jonathan Givony for ESPN, which is just really bad practice. And in fact, it's really poor reporting, saying that Dereck Whitehead had a really inefficient season. In fact, he said that on the Woj pod. It's really brutal that he even said that, because he gets paid a lot of money by ESPN to be their draft analyst. He shot 42% from three. If you're looking at points per possession, that's well over 1.2 points per possession, which is elite offense in the NBA. If you shoot 42% from three, that is an elite offensive mark. He was not inefficient. Now, he was less productive than a lot of people were hoping for, because he averaged less than 9 points a game, and he was coming off a National Player of the Year at the high school ranks. So you could argue, yes, he wasn't as productive as people would have liked to see, but he was playing injured. He had an injured foot. He actually had surgery on it before the combine, so we didn't get to see him in the combine. But does that hurt his value? Potentially. I think that's what moved him down in my mock here a little bit, is teams haven't really gotten to see him this draft process as much, because he missed some time during the regular season for Duke. Never really became a full-time starter for the Blue Devils. Did start on occasion, and I think he was pretty solid when he started, given the circumstances. And I think that it's unfair to him, because there's a narrative running around right now that he's not efficient. I think he was very efficient. He shot over 42% from three and about 80% from the line. Those are good shooting splits. Now, inside the arc, he was a little worse than I think a lot of people expected. He only shot 41% on twos this year, but it's not like that's terribly bad. In fact, you compare his numbers to Jordan Hawkins, and I think you're going to have a pretty surprising wake-up call in terms of what efficiency looks like. So Dereck Whitehead, I think, is a steal here for the Memphis Grizzlies. Remember, before the year started, in my way too early mock, we're looking at a top 6, top 7 selection for Dereck Whitehead, and that was a pretty unanimous thought before the season started. Again, kind of playing with that foot injury really did hurt the way he performed, and he just didn't have the season I think a lot of people were hoping to see from him, but he was still efficient, and I want to make sure I'm very clear on that. He was not inefficient even while he was playing injured. Pick 26, we go on to the Indiana Pacers now at this spot. This is their second pick in the first round. Remember, at 7 we went with Jarace Walker, and at this spot we're going with another player who I think a lot of people around the league do have some high-level interest in, because he's a true shot maker in Bryce Sensabaugh, one of the better mid-range scorers in this year's draft. And he does so in part because of his ability to play out of the triple threat. He's got a really nice rip through, and he's got the skill set and the physicality. As you can tell, he's very strong. He's got a nice frame to him in terms of the physical, like, kind of girth and width standpoint of things. He's just strong. He's going to be able to bump guys off and get to spots and just elevate and score, which is something a lot of 19, 20-year-olds don't come into the NBA with. He's going to be advanced in that regard. I think he's ready to make an impact right away, which is what Indiana's hoping to see from him, because this team wants to take a step forward. Jarace Walker, I think, is ready to impact this team day one. I think that Bryce Sensabaugh is as well. And you're looking at Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, Buddy Hield, Bryce Sensabaugh, of course, Benedict Mathurin, Jarace Walker, and you're looking at a team that's probably going to be pretty competitive in the Eastern Conference this year. As long as Tyrese Halliburton stays healthy and on the floor, this team's in a really good spot moving forward, as they have a decent collection of young talent. They've got some vets who can help them win right now, and they've got some potential pathways to continue improving this team as well through free agency. So we'll see what they look to do. I also wouldn't be surprised to see Dorian Finney-Smith on the Indiana Pacers next season. I've been talking about that for quite a while now on the channel. I think pick 26 could be a potential trade chip in that, or pick 29. maybe both, maybe pick 32 in the second round. But Dorian Finney-Smith, if I had to guess, if he's playing somewhere else other than Brooklyn next year, my expectation would be the Indiana Pacers to reunite with Rick Carlisle. Pick 27, the Charlotte Hornets at this spot. Remember, we went with Scoot Henderson, second overall. And here at this spot, we're going to add a little bit more perimeter shooting. You think about kind of what this team has and what they've drafted in recent years. PJ Washington, of course, a guy that he's headed toward restricted free agency, but I think he had a really nice season for Charlotte this year. And I feel like if they think that, hey, we're healthy going into next season, we have Miles Bridges back, we have then LaMelo Ball healthy, maybe PJ Washington can kind of fit into that third scoring role, and that works pretty well. And you also consider the fact that Scoot Henderson would be in the picture. That definitely helps as well. Mark Williams started to come on more and more and more toward the end of the season. I really liked Mark Williams as a selection. I thought he was a home run pick for Charlotte when they selected him. And I just think that Charlotte's in a good spot where really what they're looking to add now is more perimeter shooting. And Brandon Podziemski cashed in over 40% of his threes for Santa Clara this past year. He was actually a sophomore in college, did not play very much at all for the Fighting Illini in Illinois his freshman season, ended up transferring out to Santa Clara, and then in his first year in the conference won WCC Player of the Year and completely transformed Santa Clara's odds from where they were after losing Jalen Williams a year ago to the draft to where a lot of people were expecting them to be. Brandon Podziemski was kind of the, I wouldn't say savior, but he was the best player on the team and the best player in the conference, and because of that, they were very competitive again for that conference, and he really helped keep them afloat. I think he had a fantastic year for himself, tested pretty well in the combine too. He can make shots. He's dialed in from three, and Charlotte, having him available here at this spot, it just feels right, because this team just, I think, in my opinion, needs a lot more perimeter shooting, especially if you are going to draft Scoot Henderson. How do you kind of balance that out and add a little bit more floor spacing? And I think you really come here at 27 and you draft a shooter if you can find one. And luckily for them, Brandon Podziemski happens to be available in this mock draft. Pick 28, we're back to the Utah Jazz now, who, remember, so far in this mock, we've gone with Taylor Hendricks and Kobe Bufkin. So how do we really complement this team? And it's going with a guy who can impact winning. You look at this guy's skill set, and the shooting is definitely not there. Okay, this guy's not going to be a good shooter. He's not going to be a good scorer. So you might say, why do you have him going in the first round? It's because he impacts winning, and he's going to be a good player in the NBA. Kind of think what Josh Hart does for the New York Knicks. Andre Jackson's going to do some of those things. He's going to hustle for loose balls. He's going to defend with his heart on his sleeve, basically. And everybody in the stands, everybody on the court is going to know this guy's literally working his tail off right now because he cares about winning. He was a huge part to UConn winning the national title this year. And Utah, you know, people might say it's too early for them to worry about winning, and 100% I agree with that. That's not the end-all goal for them yet. But you do want guys in the locker room who really care about winning. And I think it's going to be a good culture setter and tone setter for what this organization is long-term expecting, which is to win. They didn't trade Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert to just roll over and be bad for the next decade. They did it so that they could load up on assets, and they want to turn this thing around and become a good team. And I think Oklahoma City is really the blueprint for that right now. They were just in the play-in, and I think a lot of people weren't expecting Oklahoma City to be as good as quickly as they are, and they didn't even have Chet Holmgren play yet. I think Utah's hoping to have that kind of growth too, where, look, we're a competitive team. We want to push for the play-in, maybe make the playoffs, have some competitive series if possible, and we have all of these assets that we can maybe flip for a star later or continue to take swings on in the draft and maybe, just maybe, find a star that way through a pick in the lottery, or maybe a pick that ends up being in the top 5 because someone gets hurt for a team that you traded with or something along those lines. Utah's going to be in a position to continue to add talent, and they want to see their own internal development. And I think Andre Jackson's going to be a nice contributing piece around those players as well, probably off the bench as a rookie, but that's A-okay for this Jazz team. Pick 29, we have the Pacers now on the clock again. This pick comes from the Malcolm Brogdon trade. So at pick 29, who could we potentially see this team going with? And this is kind of one of those swings on upside here, because for the Pacers, like I said earlier, I don't necessarily expect this team to draft with all 3 of these picks. I think a pick 29 trade is likely. I think a pick 26 trade could be likely. I could see them packaging the 2 and moving up. I think all options are on the table for the Indiana Pacers. But if they do stick here and draft, I think a player with serious upside and serious downhill physical capabilities would be fun to see. Now, Benedict Mathurin already does a decent amount of that for you, but this is more of like, hey, he's going to play with the Fort Wayne Mad Ants for a while. And let's see if he turns into something, because he's got a good physical frame to him. He's strong. He's very quick. And he jumps out of the gym. Now, he's really reliant on using his right hand to finish at the rim. But a lot of those times that he's finishing at the rim, it's a right hand power slam. He's had flashes this year where he throws some beautiful dime passes. I wouldn't count on that regularly from him yet at this point, but maybe it's an insight to what he could potentially become at some point down the road. CD Sissoko has a lot of intriguing characteristics to him just from an athletic standpoint. Now, the shot making is very questionable. I don't think he's a year one contributor at all. In fact, I'm a little bit lower on CD Sissoko than most, but I do think that there is a realm that this guy could grow into something that's pretty special, pretty unique. And if you're drafting at the back end of the first round and you have 3 picks in the first round, we've already went with players I'm confident are going to be good, Jarace Walker being one of them. Like, we don't need this to be a 100% surefire, this guy's going to be a 15-minute a game type of player. We want this to maybe turn into a, wow, this guy was picked that late in the draft type of selection. And that's what we're kind of swinging on here with CD Sissoko for the Pacers at 29. And then at pick 30, we have the Los Angeles Clippers, who moved down from pick 20 in that Eric Gordon trade where they sent Luke Kennard to Memphis. They picked up Eric Gordon. Not really a great trade for them in hindsight, of course. But at this spot, I actually have them going with Maxwell Lewis from Pepperdine. And I think a lot of people are higher on Maxwell Lewis than myself. I think Maxwell Lewis has an intriguing game. He's got some shot-making capabilities that kind of open your eyes to him a little bit. And there's definitely things on tape that you think, okay, this guy can play a little bit. But then there's also times where you consider the fact that Pepperdine wasn't any good this year, that Maxwell Lewis was their best player, and that in games against other WCC teams, he got outplayed by Julian Strother. He got outplayed by Brandon Pajemski. And just quite frankly, he wasn't that great of a player in games where he was playing against other great players. And for me, I'm a little bit lower on Maxwell Lewis than others, but I do think that there's a realm of possibility that he fits pretty well because he knocks down shots. He can rise into a mid-range pull-up, and maybe he was just tasked with doing too much for Pepperdine. I think that's a really good argument that if you put him in a smaller role, he'll be more efficient, he'll be more productive per touch, and the team would be better that way. And I think that's kind of the case of what we would see here with the Clippers. Obviously, you're not going to drop isolations for him, and you're not going to use him as your primary pick-and-roll ball handler. That's reserved for the Kawhi Leonards, the Paul Georges of the team. Maxwell Lewis would kind of follow suit and fit into a role like what we've seen a lot of other players do with the Clippers, and I think that is a better role for him. I think a more natural fit, and the Clippers are a team that could be patient with him if they want to and say, look, we believe in the shot making. Let's just see if it progresses to a point where he could be a really nice ancillary player next to our 2 stars that we have in LA. Thank you all so much for watching. I really did have a lot of fun with this NBA mock draft. Again, this was my version 3.0. There's going to be more draft content on the channel. I've got a lot of fun stuff planned. Remember, new setup coming too. I've got that whole setup ordered. So I'm really, really excited about the direction of the channel. And I'm also excited about the direction of your favorite team. If you are as well, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. Comment down below who you're a fan of, because I would love to hear who's all watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.